and teach English. I know what the Strunk and White says. If it was Chris and his wife's day, we wouldn't say Chris and Lisa Harper's day. We'd say Chris and Lisa Harper Day. So we're observing St. John Day, St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist. In preparing this presentation, I went to a lot of personal sources. Brother Frank Conger, who's downstairs too, I think. Brother John Meldorf, who's someone I admire and knows a great deal about Masonic history. Several important texts, our code book, Tennessee Craftsman, personal interviews, and then I just took commonalities, because you can find different things in different sources, and I just looked for things across the board that kind of connected the dots, and that's what I've used today. Masonry, St. John's Day essentially is like a Masonic homecoming. We've had a lot of important leaders in our nation around the world who are Masons. People like Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, actors like John Wayne, Sir Winston Churchill, and they were Masons, but many times they had, other fish to fry and were away from their lodge for extended periods of time. St. John Day was the day when they made sure they got back to their lodge. So I'd like to see that grow for us. It really, the last couple of years has started to improve, so we can also look at it as a homecoming day. The most important reason that we have a St. John Day is an opportunity to rededicate ourselves to Masonry. It's a renaissance of sorts. Rededicate ourselves to the principles of Masonry under one banner. I have this Parrot Mason up on the screen. Parrot Mason, Albert Mackey, who's another Masonic scholar, you coined the phrase Parrot Mason. In Masonry, there's a lot of recitation, a lot of memory work. And there are lots and lots of Masons out there who, if they're not careful, all they know is what they've learned through ritual. Things that they've learned they can repeat and have almost no idea of what it really means. Days like today keeps us from becoming Parrot Masons. We have a lot of really good teachers in this lodge, and I am by no means a scholar on St. John the Baptist or St. John the Evangelist. But I have benefited from the teachers we have in this lodge. Frank Conger, Lee Birchfield, Roy Baker, I could go on and on. They're good teachers because they practice reason with purpose. If someone makes a mistake, someone's doing something wrong, I myself have been called aside and said, hey brother, you're not doing it the right way. This is how we do it, and this is why we do it. Sometimes we make mistakes in lodges, and I know you've all seen those brothers who, someone makes a mistake and they drop their face or shake their head or look at someone else like, can you believe he just did that? I remember the first time I went to a Fellowcraft Lodge, Hickson, and it was a visitor. It wasn't someone from Hickson Lodge, and I made a particular sign wrong. I had it backwards. And instead of teaching me, this fellow reached across and just grabbed my hands and fixed me. And that didn't teach me anything. It taught me that I wanted to kill him. And that's all I thought about for the rest of the night. So we're really blessed with teachers in this lodge who go out of their way to make sure that we're educated and do things the right way. St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist are patron saints of Masonry. One not any more important than the other, and the two equally are our patron saints. Patron saint, the word saint in Latin means sanctus, which means a prime exemplar of piety and good principles. There are patron saints for lots of different occasions. It came out in the Middle Ages in the trade guilds. And during the Middle Ages, people were highly religious, but they're also highly superstitious. So they felt like that if they were involved in a particular trade and it was connected to a patron saint, and they could follow the examples and the principles of that patron saint, they would have a more fruitful and more righteous life. Masonry has adopted St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist. In this presentation, I'm very lucky. Some of these photographs, like this one, my wife and I took on a recent vacation. So we have St. Peter St. Peter's the patron saint of fishermen and fishmongers. We have St. Luke, who's a patron saint of artists and butchers. I'm not real sure why those two connect together, but that's how it is. Okay? St. Catherine, who's the patron saint of nurses. I was putting this together, and my boy was home, and he said, we're a wrestling family. Coach Brooks is here. He's someone who's in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. He said, who's the patron saint of wrestlers? So I looked it up. It's St. Sebastian the Martyr. So sure enough, there's a patron saint of wrestlers and boxers. St. Stephen, who is the patron saint of architecture. And this one's interesting to me. A lot of Masonic ritual and a lot of Masonic teachings is based on architecture, operating and speculating. Yet St. Stephen is not our patron saint. So when I look deeper, what I found out is even though he's called the patron saint of architecture, it's more so people who had money during the Middle Ages to commission things to be built. So they weren't actually the ones who out, and put mortar and stone together. They were people who had money and commissioned great buildings to be built. So there's where the separation falls in. St. John the Baptist. This also is a picture that my wife took on her iPhone at the Louvre. We blew it up and cropped it out. This is by Leonardo da Vinci. You see he has animal skins. You have the staff with the cross, and with the finger pointing up. Art historians refer to this as the John gesture. If you look at any of Da Vinci's paintings, he always has John the Baptist pointing up to heaven. So that's become the John gesture. So after Da Vinci, other people who kind of modeled his style, they would also use that John gesture and have him pointing up. You're not going to believe this, Chris Harper knows, but my hair looked just like that when I was in high school.
So did mine.
I'm not even playing. If you think about, especially what I'm about to tell you about John the Baptist, the person, this face doesn't quite match what we know about John the Baptist. This face is very similar to the exact same face that's on the Mona Lisa, particularly the smile and particularly the eyes. So it's almost a genderless face, if you will. You follow what I mean? St. John the Baptist, I like to refer to him in terms of a teacher analogy. John the Baptist is that teacher you had who was really tough on you, really strict. If you needed to be tuned up, he'd tune you up. Okay? But you look back on it later and you're better for it. I'm better because someone was stern with me, because somebody taught me right from wrong. Sometimes we need a foot in the butt, right? That's what I tell my students. Well, St. John the Baptist was that person. To continue this discussion of why stonemasons referred to John the Baptist goes even further when we look at this 12th century cathedral in France, as far as parallels to masonry. When this cathedral was built in French, where the cornerstone is, it says that this cathedral was built by the fraternity of St. John the Baptist. So as far back as the 12th century, we have that direct correlation, that direct parallel between operative and speculative masons. I went too far. Okay, I just stay right there with that. A few things about, I'll just go here. This cross-section of beam was taken from a pub called the Goose and Gridiron. So we talked about patron saints and what a patron saint is and why we attached John the Baptist and John the Evangelist to Masonry. But how it became that way is Masons throughout England prior to 1717 would always celebrate the feast of St. John the Baptist. And there were many lodges scattered throughout England. And that was great. Masonry was thriving. The problem is, nothing was the same. Nothing was standardized. You could go to a ritual in one part of England, and it'd be one way, and go somewhere else, and it'd be different. be very different. So they're looking for a way to standardize and stabilize masonry. So all the masters of the various lodges agreed to meet at this one pub in 1717, June 24th, today, and celebrate the Feast of St. John and talk about consolidating under one banner, United Grand Lodge of England. The pub they met at, gosh, it had been in existence. It was built in 1596. And they picked that particular pub because it was just a place that Masons like to go. Sometimes there are cop establishments or teacher, whatever. Okay? This is where Masons like to go and meet and congregate. So upstairs in this pub, they had a big dinner, observed St. John's Day, and sat down and hammered out the principles which would lead to the culmination of uniting all those lodges under one lodge, United Grand Lodge of England. What this is a section of a beam that had been cut out. And it sits in the United Grand Lodge Museum. I was lucky I got to go and spend about half a day there. There are other things that exist from that pub they still have, but because of how old it is, they keep it in a hermetically sealed kind of vault safe. The sign still exists, but it belongs to a private collector who is anti-Masonic and won't share it with them. But this is a section of the beam from that pub where they got together and voted on their first Grand Master of England. 3 years later, their Book of Constitutions was published, and they had a ritual set in stone that was common to all Masons throughout England. It also kept a lot of problems at bay. If there's a problem, today, if we have a problem in the lodge, well, we can refer to Tennessee Grand Lodge for assistance. Back then, before they united under one banner, you couldn't do that. So sometimes you have a lot of disharmony. And they elected to, every year, to meet on St. John the Baptist Day and observe a feast, kind of a homecoming. Well, as soon as England did this, Scotland decided to have their own Grand Lodge, and Ireland did the same. Only they observed St. John the Evangelist. That was their feast day. St. John the Baptist today, June 24th, it also coincides with the summer solstice. December 27th, we celebrate both saints together today because in December we have our elections. But St. John the Evangelist Day fell with the winter solstice. It's kind of important. I like to teach symbols to my students and look at symbology. And I love to study the seasons as symbols. And we teach the kids spring is when you're in your youth, your teenage years. Summer is when you're about my age, 25, 30, thereabouts. Fall, we start to get a little older, and in winter, things are starting to die out. That parallels Masonry because John the Baptist, when he died, estimated was 29, 30 years old, the summer of his life. When John the Evangelist passed, when he died, he was around 90. Okay? So I just like how that parallels, the seasons as symbols and their importance. Ultimately, those three Grand Lodges, the Grand Lodge of Scotland, the Grand Lodge of Ireland, and the Grand Lodge of England, got together and decided they would all three equally observe both days. And that's followed us all the way to where we stand today. It's kind of cool when you go in the Grand Lodge, you can type in, you can register and type in your home lodge. Daisy Masonic Lodge number 706. I was proud to do that. And you can, with one push of the button, it traces it all the way back from Tennessee to South Carolina, to the subordinate lodges in London, to the Grand Lodge of England. And I thought that was really cool. I just wanted you to see it. Well, this is today what the Grand Lodge of England looks like. I'll show you a picture of a guy who gave me a tour, and he was your typical Brit, and he had a really dry humor that took me a long time to catch on to. And once you pass through that door, you go into a little courtyard kind of thing, and there are 3 columns. You Masons will get this joke, I think. It'll be hard for anybody else. He said, hey, let me show you something. He takes me over to a column, and in English, at the bottom of the column, it says, this column is ionic. And I was like, and he's laughing like hell. I was like, just cracking up. He's like, you get it? I was like, no, I don't get it. Well, what is it? He's like, this column is Doric, but it's full of ions. I'm like, okay, I'm embarrassed. I didn't know this was a Doric column, but let's move on. It's a really interesting and neat place to visit. I wanted you to see in the long book where I signed in, where I logged us in as Daisy Lodge number 706. He wouldn't let me take a picture of it. The only reason he did is because no one else had signed in that day. Okay. If there had been other names, obviously, they are really strict, about Masonic rule. But because I was the only person, I said, I want to show my lodge, So he let me take that one picture. So, back to St. John the Baptist. We know he was a direct descendant from Ishmael, who Ishmael was Abraham's oldest son. As I said before, I want you to think of him as that teacher, that educator who loved you enough to put a foot in your behind when you needed it. Someone who was stern, who was rigid, who lived by exact principles. He was a forerunner of Christ and a transitional figure. Much like Masonry. Masonry has 1 foot in the past and 1 foot in the present. We hang on to our ancient rituals, yet at the same time we're always progressing and evolving. That was also John the Baptist. He had 1 foot in the Old Testament and 1 foot in the New Testament. He was simple, yet hard and exact man, steadfast in his beliefs, and he preached single-minded righteousness. Much like our ritual, it was important to St. John the Baptist that you're constantly self-correcting. You know the path, you know what you've been taught, and you know that you're going to deviate. But you've got to learn to self-correct and put yourself back on the path. He was known as a voice in the wilderness. And he might have been the first survivor because he lived in the woods with animal skins and ate locusts to survive. And even though he's known as a voice in the wilderness, you had to seek him out to find answers. You had to go and find him. And parallels to St. John the Baptist include to be one, ask one. If you want to be a Mason, all you have to do is find one and ask one. Seek us out. Seek someone out. Baptism as opposed to being raised. Okay? Those two things parallel one another. And also, I keep going back to the classroom because it's all I know. I teach my kids about repetition. And whenever you're looking at an author, an artist, historian, anytime you see something repeated over and over again, it will be a theme, a word, an idea, whatever, you better stop and look at it because they're trying to say something to you. In the Gospels, other than Jesus, no one else is more repeated, more talked about, expressions of ideals over and over and over than St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist. So if for no other reason, that repetition alone teaches me, I need to stop and look at this. I'm being taught something, I'm being told something. He confronted, this is another picture my wife took of John the Baptist, and again, you can see the John gesture pointing up. This is my favorite John the Baptist painting, Madonna of the Rocks, and you see where Mary's hand is on the baby to the right? Yeah? That's actually John the Baptist she has her hand on. A lot of people misinterpret that. And this is Jesus over here, and Jesus is actually giving the blessing. He's blessing John the Baptist. And in that blessing also, his fingers are pointed up, a symbol of the John gesture. for a long time, Mona Lisa was on one wall, and this painting was the exact opposite of it. And I love that repetition, of themes with all the John the Baptist paintings and then the Mona Lisa. But not long ago, they separated it and they put Mona Lisa by herself with an altar-like thing you have to stand behind, and those still stand in the long hall. See if you get my pun. St. John the Baptist confronted hypocrisy head on. Took you a minute, right? When he died, you guys know the story. He opposed the king who wanted divorce, and he would not deviate. John the Baptist would not deviate in his thought and his principles. And the original pole dancer, was it Salome? Is that how you say it? Salome? We'll call it Salome today. Asked for his head and led to the beheading of John the Baptist. The reason I bring up his death is because it parallels other elements in masonry. Jacques de Molay, for example, Hiram Abiff. Okay? So, on one side we have John the Baptist, and if you don't remember anything else about John the Baptist, remember he was stern, held steadfast in his principles, and he was that teacher who was not afraid to tune you up and teach you the hard way, which we all need sometimes. We all need sometimes. And then we have John the Evangelist, who was kind of the opposite in some ways. John the Baptist is that teacher who loved you, made you feel loved, and made you feel like you would do anything necessary to impress that person, to impress that teacher. I will not let this teacher down. I'll work my butt off to make sure this teacher, is pleased with my performance, is pleased with my work. And that was John the Evangelist. He was preferred by Scottish lodges, and many of the old Scottish lodges before the three kind of got on the same page, they're actually referred to as the old St. John's the Evangelist lodges. He was author of the Book of John, and it's important to note that if you look at Masonic ritual and you look at the writings of John the Evangelist, again, you have parallels. Sometimes it's almost like you're reading Masonic ritual. With the exception of Genesis, nowhere else is there emphasis like there is in St. John the Evangelist. We're talking about the emphasis of intertwining the Word, the truth, and the love of brotherhood of man. Those things show up over and over and over again. And as I said before, if something's being repeated, you need to stop and look at it. In several parts of creation, much like Jesus, there's lots of parallels between him and Jesus. He's known as the patron saint of brotherly love. I can sum him up best by talking about St. John the Evangelist in his old age. He was brought into a church, and he was asked to teach a lesson. Teach us something. Show us something. And he said, basically, here's all you need to know. Just love one another. That's enough. And what a simple, powerful lesson. So if I leave you any one thing about St. John the Evangelist, he's that teacher that loves you enough that you never forget him. And you want to please them, you want to work hard for them, and you want to follow their word. Now, taken collectively, the greatest teachers are those teachers who can do both. We have teachers in this lodge who can do both. When it's time to be stern, they're stern. When it's time to give you a hug or a pat on the back and motivate you that way, they do that. So the best of both worlds is when you take those two styles and you bring them together. And that's essentially what Masonry's done. That's what we do by celebrating St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist. John the Baptist, very dogmatic, very rigid. John the Evangelist, intellectual, esoteric. I know you guys have seen this a billion times. Roy Baker stands up here and does his little thing, And sometimes we never think twice about it. You have the point within a circle. And John the Baptist on one side, John the Evangelist on the other. The point within the circle, that's the individual mason. The circle around it, we hear that phrase, to circumscribe our desires and keep our passions within due bounds. That's that circle. We stay within that circle and try to live our life the best we can. And then on one side we have the principle of John the Baptist, on the other side the principle of John the Evangelist. And by striving to live between those, knowing that we want to deviate, but hopefully self-correct, we may live a more righteous and more prosperous life. It intertwines passionate zeal with learned knowledge. I love that. So think about it for a minute, you Masons who are in the room. Promise you, guarantee you, every Mason in this room has someone that they admire. Someone that Masonically they would like to emulate. Well, that's the same principles of studying John the Baptist and John the Evangelist. And those people that you admire, guarantee you see many of those same values in those brothers. Am I making sense so far, or right off the left? You with me? Okay. That kind of ends just my little review of John the Baptist and Evangelist. And there's another couple things I want to talk to you about that resulted in my trip to the Grand Lodge. And this is the guy who had that real dry sense of humor. He's an author, a writer, writes books. He writes for a newspaper. And in his lap there, those are minute books from the late 1700s. Ooh. And he's writing a book about his lodge that he's traced all the way back to the 1700s, who started a home for orphan girls. He was telling me the story. His book's going to be about this lodge that opened this charity that took in young orphan girls and had nuns and other people help raise them and take care of them. They just raised the money to keep it on its feet. At the exact same time, a lodge, sometimes lodges compete, believe it or not. This competing lodge said, well, we'll do better, we'll do one for boys. Only, he said, their lodge failed and had to be taken over by the state. And the orphan home that they started is still going strong today, and that's what his book's about. And he got up from his desk and took me around. We weren't there in time for a tour, so there were a few things we couldn't see, but he was my guide and showed Emma and I all through the Grand Lodge. This is what's known as the Kent Lodge. And it's named after the Duke of Kent, who was the standing Grand Master of the Grand Lodge. And because of his duties, he could rarely make the trip out to Kent to visit. So he opened this Grand Lodge so he could get his officers and such to come visit. And they would have lodge right there at the Grand Lodge in that room. And there were several other mini lodges like it. I could not go into the Grand Lodge room. It was locked. That's the only thing I couldn't see that I really wanted to see. But you can see it's very much like ours. You have the South, West, and the East. They do things a little bit different with their treasurer and secretary. They sit here, but they have the two columns. So for all intent and purposes, it's very much identical to our lodges today. I love that checkerboard floor. Okay, what's happening? This is the apron of Sir Winston Churchill. If you notice, it has they call them ribbons. It looks like flowers. It has 3 ribbons on it. This is his master maestri. If you're an entered apprentice, you would just have 1. If you're a fellow craft, you would have 2. You become a master mason, you have 3. They no longer use those ribbons, but those are his aprons. And beside this, I tried to take a picture of it, and it's in marble, so it didn't come out very well. But it's a picture of Winston Churchill as an entered apprentice at his lodge in Stoodholm, serving tea to his brothers. And in summation, the paragraph that's there, he explains that it doesn't matter if you're a king or a commoner, if you're a prime minister or a peasant, if you're a Mason, when you walk in the door, you check your title at the door. And as an apprentice, as a steward, he was proud to serve that role of serving his brothers. And I thought that made just an awesome statement. I want to prepare for our lodge. I took a lot of pictures. There's an entire wing dedicated to inclusion and tolerance. Sometimes in masonry, people think that white Christians have we own masonry. That's just not the case. The founding principle of masonry is that you believe in a higher power, and they show you within that little part of the museum how lots of different ethnic groups, religions come together under masonry. Rudyard Kipling, who I'm fascinated with, he's written things like The Jungle Book, Rikki Tikki Tavi. He got one of his degrees as a Buddhist. One is in Hindu and one is a Christian. Okay? And they were very far separated throughout his life. This is the entered apprentice apron of Edward VII when he was Prince of Wales. After he was raised, he was the King of England. And I had to write this down to make sure I'm right. Thus far, there have been 7 kings of England who have served as Grand Masters. The Duke of Kent is the current Grand Master, and Prince Philip, who is the husband of Queen Elizabeth, is a past Grand Master and is still very active Mason. And any Sherlock Holmes fans? I love Sherlock Holmes. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was a very, very active Mason. Okay, changing gears, we made a trip to Rome, and this is a ticket that we got to be a part of a papal audience to see the Pope. I was very excited about this, but Emma was even more excited. She's a hardcore Catholic. I'm Catholic light, which means I go to church when she brings me. But she's serious business, and she wanted to see the Pope more than anything. So I planned well in advance, almost a year in advance. Got tickets to see the Pope, and we went on a beautiful June morning. This is at St. Peter's Basilica, St. Peter's Square, excuse me. Something interesting I want you to think about. This obelisk that stands right here, okay, this Egyptian obelisk that it was pagan and then we wrote Christian lettering around it. Think how long that obelisk has been there. That obelisk was standing, that obelisk witnessed the crucifixion of St. Peter. When they crucified St. Peter upside down, that obelisk was standing there. So we had tickets to see the Pope. We had a guide who promised us to get us in perfect position. We're on the 9th row, and we're in a group of 10. Emma was the shortest. She's barely 5 foot tall. And I was very emphatic. I said, I want her to be where she can see. And she says, well, we'll put her right here, and I promise you the Pope will come right by her. She said, but here's the thing. We're also in the Argentina section. It's the Argentinian Pope. He said, when the Pope comes, they're all going to come try and push her out of the way. So I had it in my mind that I'm going to stand behind her, and I'll be danged if somebody's going to push her out of the way. Didn't have to worry about it. Emma is the sweetest person on this earth. She's very small, looks very fragile. But try to get between her and the Pope. It's a different story. Absolutely different story. Before we went, this is one of her pictures she took of the Pope. That's how close she was. She wanted to take rosaries for each of our boys. And she wanted specific rosaries. She ordered them from the Vatican. She didn't want to take a chance to get there and try to buy them and not have them. So she ordered them well in advance. And she ordered some rosaries for her brother who we're going to see, his wife, her nieces and nephews. And I started thinking who I would like to, take something for. And so I found a really cool place down in New Orleans called Saints for Sinners. Saints for Sinners is a Catholic charity that started after Katrina. They actually went there, set up business, started doing charity work to help those people, and then stayed long after. And when I look closer, their medals come from Italy, or stamped from Italy, but you see this artist in front of a huge magnifying glass, and every medal is hand painted. And every medal is somewhat different in some form or fashion. Absolutely beautiful, especially under a microscope. I have one on, and they're really small, but they're beautiful. You can see that, I'm sure you can. So I wanted some for some special friends of mine and for some people in this lodge. So we went there that morning and went through the service, and at some point they ask you, first in Latin and then in English, if you have something really beautiful. There were tons of girls in wedding dresses. And if you're going to get married or just have been married, you could wear your wedding dress to see the Pope and have it blessed, which in turn blessed your marriage. So you say a prayer for your friends, the people that you love, and Emma was insistent that the people we prayed for, we said their names out loud. I just tell you, I'm not the most religious person. I'm thankful for her who keeps me somewhat inside the lines, but I said the prayer and I said the names, and it made it just that much more special. And then the Pope blessed our religious medals, rosaries, and anything you had. At this time, if you would, I'd like for all my officers that are here, plus Lee Birchfield and Chris Harper, to approach the altar.
I hadn't heard anybody complain about that.
I have not given gifts this year to my officers because I was waiting for this day. I knew we were going on this trip, and I knew this is what I want. I want you to have a gift that was unique and as special as you are to this lodge. So I got these religious medals, carried them with me to Rome, and had them blessed by the Pope. It's especially cool that it was this Pope, Pope Francis. Historically, Catholics and Masons haven't jihad very well. But Pope Francis, not in a bull, but in a message, stated, if Masonry is all about freedom of religion under one banner, we need to give them our ear. And for a Catholic to say that, I thought that was a big milestone. I asked one of my guides, when I went to the Louvre, I said, hey, I'm a Mason, I'm doing John the Baptist Day, show me some things. When I was in Italy, I said, hey, along the way, Masonically, show me some things. And I was really happy to hear him talk about how much Masonry in Rome itself had thrived and was getting more and more members and actually people working in the church. So under Pope Francis, I was happy to have these medals blessed, and I brought one back for each of you. Thank you, Brother Frank. Lee. Brother Lee and Chris are not exactly in my officer line, but they're two people who routinely I turn to for guidance and for help, and they're always there to give it to me. Brother Dan? Thank you. Trent? Trent?
One track to another.
Brother Dan?
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you, Brother Claude. Anytime I'm the master of the lodge this year, but my officers are really driving the force. I couldn't do any of this without their help, and it's greatly appreciated. So if you would, please give my officers a hand. Thank you, brothers. Be seated. And I would like for Brother Brandon the Locks to approach the altar. Those of you who don't know Brandon and his Sweet Dog Walks, Brandon was the sole inspiration for the Tadsaw fundraiser that we recently had. And he came to our lodge one night, shared his story, and become friends since. And what I don't think you know is just how much you've inspired members of this lodge and how much you're talked about and how much you're appreciated. We love you here at Daisy Lodge. So just like with the officers, said a prayer for you, said your name, and brought you back to one of these. Thank you for everything. Thank you. Give Brandon. One other picture I want to show you. My sweet wife, Emma. If you look closely, you'll see this bag she's carrying. It's kind of a purse, but it's really a bag. There's St. Peter's in the background. She was so serious about this, about the medals, about the rosaries, about the crucifixes she bought, have them blessed. She would not let those medals out of her possession. We had safes in every hotel room, and it was fine for money or passports or whatever to be left in the safe. But she would not let those medals out of her sight. She carried those medals everywhere we went. You can look through our pictures on Facebook, anywhere. Rome, Paris, London, Manchester. Everywhere you go, you see her with that purse and with those medals inside. She was so afraid something would happen to them that she wouldn't part with them. We all have people that we admire. We talk about admiring someone whose principles that remind us to self-correct. Well, there's my self-correction. So I appreciate her. So I want you to know just how much it's meant to her. In closing, I want to thank you for coming today. I hope I didn't drag it out. I hope I didn't bore you. I feel like we did what our duty calls us to do. We got together. We had fellowship. We fed our belly. Had a little bit of education. And now we can go and enjoy the rest of our day. Anyone have anything before I move to close this? Comments, questions? If you have any questions, especially non-Masons, if you have questions about anything you see in the lodge, anything I've said, by all means ask. Or see us, privately after. No questions?
Thank you everybody for coming.